Here we go, folks. There was a video put out by former associate of Pat Contreras, MatPat, called Deadlock, which I guess is a series he has. And I guess it's like it's some sort of debate show. There's high production quality. There's CG and stuff and little pixel art. It's cute. It's cute. And this one was interesting because this was not the first but second time that Reggie Fils-amie was on there. And this was to talk about Nintendo. And should Nintendo abandon consoles is the name of the video. So it's one and the other. You don't know if they're in the same room. I think they were in the same room in front of a green screen, actually, because you can see the hand of one person, the other shot. Should Nintendo abandon consoles? And it's a silly premise. So I'm not going to get on my pal MatPat. I'm not going to get on MatPat for doing the video because, hey, it's a job. I doubt he wrote all of the script. He wrote part of it. It was presented to him, and he hosted the fucking thing. You know, and Nintendo saw it as a way to advertise the Switch because there was a chunk section in the middle where they're basically it becomes an advertiser for the Switch. I mean, it's just blatant. I'm not sure if he was paid or not, but you know, it's a blatant advertisement for the Switch, which is fine. Nintendo has to get the Switch out there. I want the Switch to be successful. You should want it to be successful too. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. But there's some questionable logic going on in this video, and it's not based 100% on my argument in the past about why the Switch will be more successful definitely than the Wii U. But we'll get into some points here. So, some points from the video I jotted down while I was watching it. So one of the arguments that's brought up by MatPat in the video is that how the stock prices are spoken of. And he talks about the stock price spiking of Nintendo in 2015 when they announced they're entering the mobile market. But what wasn't spoken of in the video was the roller coaster ride of the stock price, how it shot up and back down when the whole Pokemon Go stuff was going on last summer, and how the stock holders didn't realize that Nintendo wasn't totally responsible for Pokemon Go. They only had a minor stake in it, and so they should temper their expectations on the profits at least a little bit. So that argument means to me is that the stock value should not be the main point of contention. It should be, what is the company's value? And yes, stock prices play into overall company value, but it's not the entire picture. It is a picture, part of the picture, though. And I think that's what should be the focus overall. If you're going to talk about stocks, you got to talk about what's the value of your company now. You know, that's really the most important part of that puzzle to me. Stock prices can flutter and go up and go, and stock prices can be way overvalued anyway. So that's not a proper way to even argue, even fakely in a script to, you know, the president of a company. That just was weird to me. Well, the whole video was weird. Let's get into, but anyway. All right, so Super Mario Run is brought up and how the conversion rate wasn't the best. It underperformed. I'm not sure what standards they were speaking to in that video that MatPat was reading off the script. What numbers were they totally expecting for a $10 app, which is a little pricey. But what we found out, and it has been released, is that there was 80 million downloads, okay? And 5% of the 80 million paid for it, okay? Ended up unlocking it. So let's do some pat math here. Let's do some pat math here. 80, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Pat math's my favorite time. Not MatPat, pat math. All right. So that means 4 million people. And again, this is not on any Android devices yet, which there's a lot more Android devices nowadays than iOS. 4 million times 10. That's a $40 million revenue stream right there in only 2.5 months. That ain't bad for a game that they didn't put a lot of money or R&D into. You know, that's not bad at all. I would take that. I would definitely take that. That's better than nothing. There's not a loss on this app. There absolutely is not a loss. They're not operating at a loss here. Again, I don't know what Apple's cut is here, but special. But even if their cut's only 70% the standard, $28 million. Nintendo has made a minimum $28 million of gross revenue so far, not including the Android ones, which will probably make the same amount, if not more, on overall. So it's fine. And Nintendo announced they're going to do 2 to 3 new apps or games a year. So I think they're going to tap into that market just fine. That's okay. A good point that Reggie brought up, thank God, I was going to fucking tear my hair out, was that, and one that I should have probably emphasized more in the past videos, is that Nintendo's really the only one doing hardware innovation anymore. They're the only ones trying to do new stuff with a gaming console, or at least taking the risks. Microsoft and Sony are basically sitting behind being, okay, what's Nintendo doing? Motion controls? Is that going to work? Okay, we'll try to dip our toes in here. Okay, all right, we're going to do that. Microsoft and Sony's innovation with the PS4 and Xbox One is, okay, these are powerful gaming rigs now. They're supercomputers. That's their innovation. There is no innovation. They're taking parts from that you can get in a PC and throwing it into a console. That's their innovation. As much as you guys want Nintendo to not put out hardware anymore, what would you want the landscape to be then? You know, like, would you just have either a PC or games I could also play on a PC? What's the point of having gaming consoles then? If that's the point, you might as well say, hey, Sony, Microsoft, you guys should go third party then, which Microsoft already has for the most part, because now a lot of their Xbox One games you'll be able to get on the PC as well, at least on Windows 10. So that's already done. But Nintendo ain't doing that. They ain't doing that. Too much profits to be had potentially. They ain't going to give it up. I'm not going to stop. And hell, they just even announced more NES Classic Editions. That counts as hardware too, if you remember. MatPat says at 6 minutes in, Super Mario Run is proof that Nintendo can still bring new ideas to the table. Super Mario Run was not a new idea. It was repackaging elements from New Super Mario Bros. U and then just shoving it somewhat eloquently, I will say, into a endless runner style game. So it's not a new idea. It's just that they're doing an app, and you just said before that they underperformed. So what are you really saying then? They underperformed on a new idea. They are bringing new ideas to the table. The fact that their new console is really a portable, but then hooks to the TV, the opposite of the Wii U, is really a fresh new idea. Says just create the peripherals. All right. I think you're going to get into a weird... If you saw Nintendo start creating peripherals just for their certain games, I think that would be an awful idea. Because you'd have them dumped within a few months like you see all the frickin' Rock Band and Guitar Hero equipment. Players don't want to have to shell out money that only work for very specific games. We are way past that. We are past that there ever being that anymore, and having an appeal besides it being a fad like music games, which had a small comeback, but still that's not coming back. We're past that point. Even the Zapper on the NES, there was only a dozen Zapper games. You know? Well, let's look at a certain NES guide app and I'll tell you for sure. But there wasn't... Thank God I have it. I can not know, not talk entirely out of my ass about this stuff. But we are past that point where there's going to be sort of marquee accessories just for a couple of games. I don't see that happening ever again. I think that if you do that, that would be an awful idea. That would hurt your sales, because then instead of selling your game for only $60, if Nintendo went third party, now we got to go third party $60, plus you got to buy our $40 controller or our $80 controller. Who's going to do that for 3 to 5 games they really want? Versus buying a system where every game has to then be used with that controller set. It just doesn't make any logical or any business sense to do that. It just doesn't. You think that, well, they're going to make money anyway. They're not. The money's not going to come there. I mean, basically, when you're buying a Nintendo Switch, you're forced to buy the Nintendo controllers, so they're making a profit on that, but that's going to be used for every game on the system. I think that's a really backwards way of doing business, where you're going to say, oh, just create the peripherals, and without really thinking about what's the actual market then. I just don't, that's just a weak idea, weak argument. Going back to this, I talked to someone on Twitter about this, about how many games Nintendo would have to make up in sales to cover the losses of not getting profits from hardware. Does anyone actually want to try and calculate that out? For real. I'm not trying to be snarky here. It's going to be a lot of fucking games, though. A lot. In my head with my pat math, they would have to try to sell 5 times as many first-party games to make up for that loss in console revenue. 5 times. And you're not even counting at that point the loss of profit, and this is a lot bigger profit, for those extra controllers and accessories. And I know it doesn't mean just like, you know, those special controllers you want to sell on your own, but I'm talking about that extra power cord, that extra, you know, little case, controller case, you know, protector, extra sensor bar, you know, stuff like that. That little stuff that people need sometimes. That money adds up quickly. You know, memory cards on past consoles. Another good one where it's like profits up the ass on that. You imagine how much profit Sony made from like PS2 memory cards. They're worthless. And they were selling at like $10, $15 a pop or whatever. Even if you think that the profit margin is smaller than games for console sales, which it is. The games make a lot more money than consoles overall. Peripherals and accessories make up for a ton of profit still, so you can't do that. The amount, and plus Nintendo doesn't have that foothold. Nintendo's not in the position they are to have franchises. They're not like, you could say, okay, Mario's the most popular sort of guy out there, but if you look at the sales, the most popular like game on the Wii, not even the Wii U, on the Wii did 40 million on the Wii, and that was one game. That was the Mario Kart Wii game. That was a big system seller. Or the most popular game on that system, you know, Mario Kart Wii, without looking at the list, it probably is. But there's not many more of those. I think like Smash Brothers did like 10 or 11 on the Wii and on the Wii U, like not even that much, like half of that on the Wii U. So the proportions don't work out. There's no Call of Duty franchise. There's no Battlefront. There's no Madden that Nintendo's going to put out that everyone's going to run and buy anyway. So just saying go third party without actually thinking about how many more games they'll push is really, really just thoughtless. Just thoughtless. By the way, saying goodbye to hardware means saying goodbye to Amiibo. I know that you could try to sell Amiibo without the controller functionality, but I don't see that working quite as well, even though people do collect these as toys. But Amiibo, again, we always forget about the Amiibo. How much money has Nintendo made off those fucking pieces of plastic? A ton. We go back to the argument about third-party support. And then Nintendo, you know, Nintendo not having third-party support is going to mean it's going to fail. Nintendo didn't have good third-party support on the N64 or the GameCube, and those did just fine. They turned a profit. Obviously, they weren't as big a success as they should have been compared to the competitors. Sure. Handhelds were totally ignored in the video. I'm surprised Reggie didn't bring that up and say, hey, we got the 3DS. We got this 3DS thing that's made us a ton of money. 61 million of these bad boys sold. That wasn't brought up. And his other comment, he says, people don't want to shell out a few $100s just to play a few select titles. That's Reggie should have said in the video, what do you think the Xbox One and PS4 are? What do you think those are? Since a chunk of those you can play either on the other console or you can get on the computer. And everyone owns a computer. So it's silly. It's just a silly argument. If people really want to play Breath of the Wild and buy 2 other games for the Switch, they're going to do that. You know, it's sort of a once-in-a-lifetime experience. There's not a Zelda game out every year. It's like, every 5 years, a major console Zelda game, something like that. So it's not like you're going to have to repeat it anytime soon for that. Another quote I got from here, almost every manufacturer loses money on console sales. Why not remove that risk entirely? Because the reward is huge for consoles. That's why, because Nintendo has made bank on all their consoles except for the Wii U. That's why you don't remove the risk. You remove the risk if you don't want to make money. You remove the risk. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Well, Nintendo ventured out with that Wii system and made billions of dollars from it. So, I mean, it's just a silly argument to bring up. Silly argument. The revenue from the Wii was roughly $20 billion. That doesn't count peripherals. Doesn't count extra fucking Wiimotes that everyone went out and bought either. So, yeah. So if you're talking 100 million Wii consoles that sold, you also realize that means that at least you sold at least 100 million Wiimotes, most likely, because everyone went out and bought a second one or more than one. Or just saving half. They probably sold 50 million Wiimotes. And then 50 million nunchucks. Think about that for a second. Think about what that means, the revenue from that. That's insane. That is insane for that. Those little shitty nunchucks that cost, what, $15 each? That cost Nintendo $1.50 to make each, you know what I mean? And I'm tired of people saying the Wii's an outlier. Like, the Wii's this giant outlier in Nintendo's history. The Wii's an outlier. Never mind the fact that the NES dominated the market. You know, when the NES was out, 90% of the market share was the NES for the first few years, you know? Super Nintendo did gangbusters. You know, Wii's this outlier. Game Boy dominated the handheld market. Game Boy Advance, the DS, 3DS dominates the market. Yeah, the Wii's just this little outlier. Go away, Wii. Hardware is hardware. The strategy is the same overall. You want to sell the games on the hardware, you gotta make the hardware and sell it. And you get the revenue from both. Just silly. Just silly. And 64 was a success too. Yeah, it was dwarfed by the PS1. It was still a success. Nintendo earned a profit from that. With all the controllers they sold, all the fucking memory cards and the little rumble packs besides their first party games. That's just silly. It's just silly. By the way, the Power Glove was brought up at some point for some reason. And like it was pointed at as like, for shame. Nintendo tried the Power Glove out. Nintendo didn't make the Power Glove. I'm not sure if the editor or writer of that video realized that. Mattel did the Power Glove. Where's my one out in the box up there? There it is. Mattel did it. So that's just a sort of a waste. It was a sort of a little waste. It was a cute little joke, but it was a waste. That's all. And then finally, the one thing that really annoyed me was that the comparison to Sega. And that's where Reggie should have just had a veto power on the script and be like, dude, don't fucking put Nintendo and Sega into the same paragraph, let alone the same sentence. False equivalency. It was awful about how MatPat's argument was, well, the year after Sega left the console market, they turned a profit for the first time forever. Nintendo is not in Sega's position. The dire straits that Sega had to leave the console market. They were bleeding money. They were in really bad shape. Nintendo is not in really bad shape. Nintendo is in good shape. Very good shape. You cannot start saying, well, go third party like Sega did. You can't do that because Sega doesn't have the properties that Nintendo has either. Sonic isn't Mario. Sonic's popular. Mario is 10 times as popular. Legend of Zelda, what do you compare that? Phantasy Star? Not in the same fucking universe of popularity. Smash Brothers, Virtua Fighter? Fighting Vipers or something? Was that Sega, right? Like, no. Mario Kart, what's your comparison? Daytona USA? Is there a Sonic kart racer I should know about? Crazy Taxi, yeah, that's as popular as Metroid, isn't it? You see how silly it gets when you start just throwing out statements like, oh, they should just go third party. Because of that, they have a draw to get people to their first party games, unlike Sega did at the end. If Sega's games were a draw, the Dreamcast would have been a much bigger success and Sega would still be around. But it didn't work out. Besides other mismanagement, though, it didn't work out. Not everyone needs to play, the next Crazy Taxi or the next Sonic game. Everyone needs to play that Breath of the Wild or that new Mario Kart game. Those are system sellers. The new Super Mario Odyssey game, that's a system seller. Sonic Adventure, not everyone needs to play that game. I'm sorry. It's just that's just the way it is. The smartphone revolution, which I laugh at, that was brought up in the video, and that if it hasn't taken over a game by now, it's never going to happen. Sorry. You can never totally emulate the experience of playing a game on a PC or on a console on a fucking phone. It's just, I fucking hate that. The most popular mobile games are totally different experiences than the most popular console and PC games. There's no popular fucking first-person multiplayer shooter I'm playing on my mobile phone. I'm not playing a Mass Effect game, a third-person, huge adventure game. That's not going on your phone ever. Sorry. That's not happening. Just not. Your phone will blow up like the freaking Galaxy, Note 7 or whatever, because of the drain from the too much processing power. It's just silly. There are two entirely different markets and two entirely different sets of games for the most part. on that. So anyway, yeah, I hope I can get Reggie on a video sometime. But I'm glad that Reggie defended himself. I'm hoping that he wrote a lot of that himself or with help from Nintendo, because a lot of those arguments in that video were just absolutely silly, and they're just silly.